I'm Catherine McLean, founder and CEO of Dillon Green, and today I have with me Anne Marie Denman. She's the co-founder and partner at Excelsior Energy Capital. Thanks so much for joining me today.
It's my pleasure. Thanks, Catherine.
And you are based in Minnesota, St.
That's
Paul?
right.
Yep.
Just outside of it, Excelsior, Minnesota. We got very creative with our name. It's basically where we're from.
It's funny, I was going to ask you that actually, where the name came from. So for those who may not know, please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Listen, as you mentioned, co-founder partner at Excelsior, a lawyer by training, made a less than ideal lawyer in my estimation, much better commercial person, but started off my career as a lawyer at Jones Day in the oil and gas and M&A space. Moved to Bracewell with a focus on oil and gas as well, and really came to fall in love with the energy space through oil and gas, surprisingly. And from there, started to see the writing on the walls in the energy transition and moved to Terraform Power, where I assistant general counsel, and then moved to the commercial side. And from there, that's where I met my co-founders and partners at Excelsior, which I'm sure we'll get into the story of that here.
So you began your career as a White House law clerk on the Council of Environmental Quality Office of the General Counsel before working at law firms, as you mentioned, Bracewell and Jones Day. How did you make the transition to managing director and assistant GC at Terraform?
Yeah, so the CEQ role was during my time during law school, where I was in DC, and so that was for, interestingly enough, between the Bush and the Obama administration, and experienced both, which actually was pretty informative of some of the perspectives we'll talk through today. And then, all joking aside, I just as I was a lawyer, I appreciated the training, I appreciated the perspective that it gave me, but I found my brain wanting to connect dots outside of just the legal realm, and not just not to kind of belittle the legal realm, but I found my brain wanting to look more broadly as to the why,
Right.
and to understand how things work. And so as I was experiencing my time kind of leading the legal team there for acquisitions at Terraform, getting more exposed to the financial aspects and what made the business tick, what were the broader risks, the broader opportunities, and with that, shifted into the managing director role at Terraform, reporting into Chris Moakley, who is president of North America, who then became my partner here at Excelsior.
And what ultimately, so I know you've covered it a little bit in your statement just now, but what ultimately motivated you to start Excelsior Energy Capital specifically?
So myself and my three co-founders, so Chris Moakley, Alex Ellis, Ryan Fegley, we all met and worked together at Terraform Power, which we then sold to Brookfield. And at that point, we were considering staying on and participating in the leadership team at Terraform post Brookfield ownership, but we had seen this wall of foreign capital in particular trying to access the clean energy, the energy transition space in the United States, and really struggling to take this, relatively low cost of capital and participate at any scale in the US, because it's a pretty complicated market, right?
Right.
You have the tax credits, you have federal and state law, you have local, you have all of these dynamics, you have ISOs, you have utility dynamics, all of these that you would have someone like our anchor investor, the Development Bank of Japan, who would be looking at this and working through thoughtfully the diligence of an asset. And by the time they were ready to move forward, the asset would have been sold already, right? It's just a very fast moving market here in the United States. And I didn't fully appreciate the complexity of that and what it would mean for someone who's not living and breathing this every day to be moving at the pace that the market tends to move. And so with that, we saw this need to connect this fairly fragmented and very large clean energy market in the US with this wall of institutional capital. And so we started the fund with the Development Bank of Japan as our anchor investor in 2017. We kicked it off before they came on board. I give a lot of credit to my other founders who had kids at the time. I was a solo operator at the time, and But we all sort of jumped and took this leap of faith together before we had any capital, and we really learned the fund business. Start we didn't start Excelsior initially clear on what sort of structure was going to be important, but as it became, as we started working with capital partners like Development Bank of Japan, it became clear that it was really important that we form a fund so that we could have discretion over the capital, so that we could move quickly and
Right.
thoughtfully and efficiently. And you know, as you know, probably better than most, this world moves quickly.
Yeah.
Everything is shifting. It is the transition. And
Yes.
so not only is it important to move quickly, but to be constantly keeping a pulse on where it's going to ensure that, as you're thinking about making investments, you're really looking not just down the road, but around the corner. And that's something that with our fund structure, we're able to, as founders coming from the industry, having an operational energy lens, we're
Mhm.
able to process with our team fairly quickly what's evolving, and to be making those decisions on investments, being as tapped in as possible to not just the reality of today, but where it's going.
So 2024 was a banner year for you all. It included a 2.2 gigawatt energy storage agreement with Fluence, a 7.5 gigawatt energy storage agreement with LG, a solar+storage sub-portfolio sale to BlackRock, a 2 gigawatt agreement with Heliene, and the launch of Lydian Energy. What work are you most proud of having achieved since you founded the company?
Great question. I'm tired just thinking of all of
That's a lot.
that.
It's a lot to read.
We have an incredible team. We truly have an incredible team, and I think thinking about the launch of Lydian, and before that, just the launch of the team at Excelsior and what we've done. We only have 25 people at Excelsior. Lydian's a much larger endeavor, but we, by design, intended to be lean, mean. Hopefully not mean in the negative sense, but we have really been able to look at where the market is going, and digest that, and move quickly where we saw um, opportunity and need.
Right.
So as you kind of listed out, a big portion of those activities that you listed out was a real focus on domesticating our supply chain.
Mhm.
Like most others, well, so to answer your question, I think in many ways, the people that have been willing to take this leap of faith with us, both at the fund level and now with Lydian Energy, um, I think that's probably what I'm most proudest of, that these folks have seen something in what we're doing, that they're willing to tie their fates to us.
Yep.
Um, and as an outshoot of that, what it's allowed us to do is to really move forward with what we were envisioning from the onset, which is to see where the industry is going, how the world and the macros are shifting, and to move and to be on the front end of that. So again, going back to that list of items that you mentioned from last year, it's big focus on really de-risking our supply chain, like many others in the industry, with the double whammy of COVID plus the start of the Ukraine-Russia war. We saw real pain points in our supply chain. I'm
Right.
not saying anything anyone else doesn't know, which is the cost to ship modules was more expensive than modules themselves, right? Certainty of supply chain was just not there. And so even before um, the clarity that the IRA brought in terms of incentivizing domestic supply chain, we were seeing the need to really get deeper into supply chain, to not be a taker, but to really be driving, getting closer to the product and understanding where the supply chains were coming. And so, because we had been thinking and looking at that, we were able to move very quickly when the IRA was passed to lock down domestic content. We're very proud of the work we're doing with Fluence for the first domestically produced battery cells coming out of Smyrna, Tennessee. Very proud of the work we're doing with LG out of their Michigan factory. that is producing domestic cells, and also with Heliene out of modules domestically produced out of Minnesota, that not only allows us to benefit from the domestic content adder, um, but maybe almost more importantly, it gives us certainty of supply,
Yeah.
right? And it just takes away this existential threat that is very difficult to uh, anticipate, right? Geopolitical concerns.
Mhm.
I'd like to think I have some control over it. I don't, right? And so, interest rates and macro factors outside of our control. That's what keeps me up most, and or not keeps me up most. Those are the things that I don't like. Risks that we have no control over. So these
Right.
allowed us to get closer to the source of something that in the past we haven't had as much direct involvement and control, bring it closer to home, and in consequence really shore up certainty that gives us the ability to then create certainty for those buying power from us.
But I think it's interesting too, like you're also contributing to US jobs, like US
Oh, for
manufacturing,
sure.
like safe, good, well-paid jobs.
Oh, listen, the beauty of a lot of the work we do here within the industry is it's you get to both make money, which is our goal. We're for profit, and that's our commitment to our investors, and create all of these other values,
Yeah.
right? We're cleaning up the grid. We're providing more certainty to the grid.
Yep.
We're providing jobs to not just for the manufacturing by motivating that, but we're also providing jobs in the local communities
Right.
where we are deploying these batteries and these modules, and not just creating jobs, but we're increasing the tax base
Right.
by paying material taxes where we're providing there, um, which is really lifting up economies. I don't want to overstate this, but I should say at least participating in a material way in the economies in which we are deploying battery and solar projects.
Yeah. So, as we've discussed, you have over a decade of experience in traditional and renewable energy, in mergers and acquisitions, including leading over $5 billion in wind and solar transactions. What are some of the key challenges you face while leading these transactions? You've touched on it a bit, probably interest rates.
Yeah, you know, I think the hardest and the most interesting is people. Right. So as we think about all of these transactions,
Yeah.
and I think you taking it more broadly from transactions to um, really any sort of relationship where whether that's with our limited partners, with our buyers of power, or buying projects in any or entering into these supply arrangements, so much of it is about communication, finding partners that you can have clear communication and that look to find um, can really communicate shared goals and or parallel goals.
Right.
And that's been something that, in law school you take negotiation classes and you can go online and figure out. And what I always struggled with early on in my career was trying to figure out how to create the outcome. And what I've learned during this, you know, 10, 15 years of doing this is the more I can lean into something that is both grounded in reality for me, as well as authentic with how I function, which is fairly direct. I
Mhm.
don't have a good poker face, for better or for worse.
Mhm.
I'm fairly impatient by design and by birth. And with that, leaning into that in terms of being able to be direct with counterparties and partners to say, here is what we need, and here's what we can and cannot do. And that does open you up to some potential that that information is used against you, or that, right, and so you have to be thoughtful and careful about that. But I think in all of this, what's been um, the one of the biggest joys of my career and kind of evolving and getting the crow's feet is really just enjoying what what we do now, which is to find and to partner with good people who have complementary skill sets or products or capital to what we're good at, and how to create more value together. And that's been something that, at least for me, has been, increasingly the focus of what we do.
Speaking of challenges, you were recently featured in the Wall Street Journal pro private equity article. This is quite a title: Hunger for Electricity Seen Keeping Renewable Power Investment Flowing Under Trump. Can you please elaborate on why you think investing in renewables is a bipartisan issue?
It's going back to the conversation around jobs and about taxes and all of this, right? The vast majority of where we're investing, where we're placing these solar, wind, and storage projects are in energy communities, which are largely red locations, right?
Yep.
And that was, I think, in part by design with the IRA, or whether by design or happenstance, that is what is happening.
Yes.
And that's happening at the manufacturing level. It's happening at the project level, where this is creating an industry that is allowing for really good paying jobs, material tax increases where these projects are being located. You're moving from agricultural tax assessments to power assessments, which is really increasing the tax rate. And maybe sort of the very obvious, just increasing the national supply of energy.
Right.
Right. So as we think about, take away politics, take away where we all might disagree, what do we, at least as I think about the things that we all probably agree on, is we want to make sure we're safe. Us, our kids, right? That we're safe. The national security, right? And global security, but let's focus on national security, and let's focus on, energy is what I think the Secretary of Energy, Chris Wright, said something like, energy is the basis of everything else. I'm misquoting him, but basically everything starts from energy. And so we need energy. And so as we think about how do we ensure for our country a reliable, affordable, resilient, sustainable grid, I think it's hard pressed to find anyone that doesn't agree on that.
Right.
And so as we look at that and say, what we're doing and participating, not just because they're in red states and so therefore it's a red and a blue issue, but also because solar and storage and wind, solar and wind are the cheapest form of energy, even without subsidies, and it doesn't require fuel. So it's very, very domestic, right? The solar is literally where we're located. The wind is literally where we're located. We don't have to go abroad to get that. And I know, and so as we think about that security of energy, keeping the costs low with solar and storage allowed to do, batteries which allow both more solar and storage to be that lowest priced energy being able to be shifted to other parts, as well as the value of batteries for evening out the haircut. I think that's something that very few people would actually disagree upon.
Yeah.
And I think there's been this kind of like traditional concern that it's one or the other, right? And in fairness, I kind of get it pre-load growth, right? But like for a long time, it was just load was flat. And so you're all kind of vying for different parts of the same demand. Whereas now we're seeing this take off in a way we haven't seen since, God, I don't know when. And everyone can debate whether that load growth is 10x or 4x or whatever that is, but everyone agrees there's a massive load growth, and we really do need all of these pieces to come together to ensure that we don't increase the cost of electricity in a material way, that we don't put the security of the grid at risk, and that we don't slow down the ability for load growth, especially with AI or manufacturing or any of these industries that are really important for national security, that fighting over what kind of energy doesn't start putting at risk any of these shared goals. And
Right.
in our mind, we need all of it, right? I don't think we need coal, but we certainly need baseload until we get nuclear or other forms. We absolutely need gas. We absolutely need
Right.
solar. We absolutely need storage, and we need wind. And
Right.
there's no reason we shouldn't be pulling these all together, in my estimation.
So staying on the same topic of politics, a topic close to my heart, DEI has become a very controversial term recently. You've been outspoken about whether or not DEI policies translate to a lowering of pure merit standards. Can you talk a little bit about your perspective on this?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. So, when we started drafting our DEI policy at Excelsior, we didn't have one for a while. It was sort of like, I'm a gay woman, doesn't that count for our DEI policy? Like, I know that that's maybe, but in some ways we were a small team and we said kind of like, hey, this is important to us, and it just is. But then, as we started to grow and as we started having portfolio companies, it became clear we needed to draft it. And I kind of took the lead in doing this. And as I started looking at DEI policies from, everyone and their mother, I honestly was a little bit turned off by it all, because these policies, one, felt like, a lot of them felt like it was rinse and repeat
Right.
or platitudes. And so then we started, so it really had us starting to think, well, like, why do we actually care about it? Right? There are a lot of things that we individually care about, but as a business, why do we care about it? And so we did a lot of, self-reflection before we drafted a policy to say, does this really, of all the things as a company we can or should be putting our effort and like, what does this do for our stated business goals?
Okay.
And so as we thought about that, it became really clear that how we functioned just as a partnership, myself and my three founders, and as a team, the goal was to create an environment where we had a bunch of smart people that came from different perspectives, different areas of expertise, different ways of thinking about things because of different, you know, just different upbringings and different environments.
Experiences.
Yeah, that allowed us to be looking at risks and opportunities in different ways. And we
Mhm.
sort of had developed this habit of everyone trying to bring their whole brain and experience to the table, and sort of we're pretty direct with each other about, like, that doesn't make sense to me, that makes sense to me, and just we had to kind of do that, right? Especially myself and my three co-founders. And so what we found was, in that, what it allowed for was for us to actually ensure that we didn't have this sort of vacuum or feedback loop of thinking.
Right.
Because when my partner, who co-leads the investment team, Ryan, we have very different uh, initial approaches to most things. And because of that, I think it's one of the greatest strengths, is that we actually don't see the world the same way at first glance on most things. And what it requires is, because there's a basis of respect, and we sort of trust the other's thinking and perspective, and say, I don't understand that at all. That makes no sense to me. And so we, like, sit down and think through it and understand the perspective. What that's allowed us to do is to ensure that we really are looking around the corner, that we're not just saying, oh, that you think like me, great, let's do that, right?
Yeah.
There is this group think that happens. And frankly, this happens when you have people of shared perspective or upbringing experiences, whether it's all women, all men,
Yeah.
all gay people, all straight people, right? You have this, and part of the controversy, I think, around DEI has been that we're in a business environment where it has been traditionally men driven leadership. And I
Right.
think it's a really, really human uh, uh, drive to surround yourself with people that you relate to,
Of
right? That
course.
you want to get a beer with, that you want it, right? And so,
And
um,
unconsciously, a lot of it.
yeah, and I would say is like that's not bad. I think that's super normal, right? Um, and I think what as we were developing the DEI policy is saying like let's not say like that's bad, but let's be conscious of saying that if we just hire people like ourselves, we're going to develop a investment team and invest and a team that just is seeing the world from one slice. And it's not going to give us the opportunity to really bang up our ideas to make sure we're seeing different ways of what are the risks here? How do we look at the world? What like that and that is and so we developed a DEI policy that was structured around what we experienced in reality. And so when you mentioned being outspoken about DEI, I actually I think there's something healthy about trying to take away the fad of it,
Right.
right? Like the same thing with like greenwashing, ESG. I don't mind if there's like a healthy, we kind of all know it when we see it when it doesn't feel authentic, when it feels like it's dressing.
Yes.
And so, right. And so I think like this backtracking of a lot of companies on this, to me, it just indicates they never actually believed in it.
Yep.
And for me, it's not about whether you're a good person or a bad person, and good people believe in DEI and bad people don't. It's whether like let's have a discussion and a debate around whether diversity of experience actually creates a good business outcome, a better business outcome, or a better whatever outcome, whatever industry or space you're in,
Yeah.
whether you're in politics or business. And so I like that's just sort of the way. But I worry that we're sort of throwing the baby out with the bathwater because I sort of respect the sort of knee jerk reaction of like, this is not authentic. These DEI policies or ESG that sort of were like rinse and repeat and never from a business or a whatever industry perspective or whatever sort of environment perspective never kind of came from an authentic conviction that they had value and get rid of the fad and then listen, I'm in the business of making money, right?
Mhm.
That's what we're doing. That's what we've committed to our investors. DEI and our DEI policy that talks about this, that it creates a space for all of those perspectives to come in and a space that ensures that not only are those perspectives desired, but also that when you hear a perspective that's not like yours, that 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 should actually alert to like shit, maybe I'm not seeing something versus they're wrong, I'm right, and there's something to learn here. Um, anyway, I could talk about this for decades, but that's sort of the lens by which I kind of have been looking at DEI with all of this back and forth.
I just find that I find it really, really interesting. And I think that the way you've explained it is very interesting. I mean, because the way I've always, thought about is like diversity of thought, right? You said diversity of experience. But also just having people that are able to contribute to a conversation that may be a blind spot for another person. Because there's so much studies on how companies are just more profitable the more diverse they are. So if like we just, like you said, if we just sort of strip it away and get down to like why it's important,
So
like,
why?
you know?
That's where I think sometimes we do ourselves a disservice when we see there's a value but don't articulate the why.
Hmm.
And then sort of there's this like pressure to get on the bandwagon or you're viewed as not progressive or
Right.
not a good person or whatever. And I would encourage companies not to just say, great, like, oh man, you should put a DEI policy back on, but the why, right? These things don't last the test of time if they're not grounded in reality and grounded in conviction. Or
Right.
it's just a fad. And it's just in my mind, it actually doesn't serve our purpose.
Yeah. As a leader in the renewable energy industry, how do you approach fostering diversity and inclusion within your teams?
Yeah, and so I think there are a few things. One, I think just from a gender perspective, maybe not gender, but from a breaking apart sort of traditional roles and responsibilities as a human,
Right.
whether it's female, man, parent, other obligations. I think for us, we really try to create this concept of flexibility and accountability, which
Okay.
in my mind, from a um, allowing both more women to participate and stay, as well as to encourage men to participate in home life or parent life or whatever is important to them life in a similar fashion that women are have been afforded the opportunity to do, right, and I say that in that like and you guys can take this out because I'm formulating my thoughts here real time, but that by creating flexibility, it allows people to it to to value the time that's important to them,
Right.
while and getting rid of this concept of um, hours or um, hours creates outcome. And I'm not suggesting we go to a 4-day week and we work incredibly hard, uh, lots of hours. But for me, I try to drop off my son at 9:15 in the morning, and I show up to work at 10, and I
Mhm.
leave every day at 5 when I'm not traveling in order to be there to relieve my nanny. My wife travels quite a lot as well. And we, right. And now I usually am working at 5 and I'm usually working at 10 p.m. But that kind of flexibility, and I'm just giving from my own experience, but within Excelsior, we try to create that flexibility to allow the team to really craft their schedule in a way that allows them to be responsive to their other needs at home or elsewhere.
So it sounds like you treat them like adults.
Imagine. Yeah, no, but right, like, and I don't. But the hard thing is that we have a small team, so it's a little bit easier for us because there's a deep trust built among the team, and accountability is easy to track because we have clear KPIs and you hit them or you don't, right? And so we don't really care if you're working at 5 a.m. or you're working at 2 p.m. As long as we're accomplishing our goals.
Right.
So I do think for bigger organizations it can be a little bit more complicated, but I think like that flexibility with accountability, at least for us, has created this space to for any of those who are parents in particular,
Yeah.
traditionally been a role borne by women, but more increasingly seeing men bear that as well, which is incredible in my mind, that it creates an environment to allow for that while being um, like allow them to be incredibly successful at what they're doing here
Yeah.
and not translating FaceTime or specific hours to success. And I think the other thing is we tend to be a very direct team. Like we don't pull punches when we have different views on investments or perspectives, but that is underlying a deep respect for each other.
Right.
And that is the premise. And so as we talk about like diversity and inclusion, um, this space by where as ideas come in that there's one a sort of fundamental desire or a willingness to think that a alternative view must be stupid or wrong, but that to try to withhold that reaction or that conclusion and creating space to have that conversation. And the
Right.
fact that we might view things differently at the onset, it's just part of the process to get to a better shared outcome. And so
Right.
I think that allows for like that environment, and we don't do it perfectly, right? But that environment allows for an encouragement of bringing in ideas and even showing at the top. Again, the co-leader of investments, we visibly in front of the team have different perspectives, and we and kind of work through it so that there's not this view that there's one godlike character that is always right or this person's always right. We really try to encourage everyone to bring their whole brains and self to their jobs, and to have an environment that is needing that in order to accomplish our goals here at Excelsior.
Well, I mean, just what you said about not doing it perfectly is just, to me, like building a company, it's like a living, breathing thing, right?
Yeah,
Like it's
exactly.
going to like evolve and change organically, and just giving people like the space to be able to express themselves and feel like they're respected. I mean, I just was talking to somebody today, and because of her title, she's not allowed to talk to another person because only if you have a certain title could you then contact that person. I was just like,
Wild.
oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Like, this is why I work with myself. These kinds of
Yeah.
companies, there's plenty of them, and it just shows you like having somewhere like I'm more familiar probably with Lydian than Excelsior, but
Yeah.
you start to get a reputation quite quickly for being
Right.
someone people want to work, and it then becomes a lot easier to attract the all-stars,
That's right.
you know?
Yeah, yeah, that's been I was going to say it's something about once you have a more diverse set of people, it's sort of self-fulfilling.
Absolutely.
So the first is the hardest, right? Or the starting of it is the hardest.
Yep.
But this is where I think with any company, it's this question of don't do something you actually don't have conviction around just because to check a box. Have the hard conversations and like, does this actually create a better outcome for my company, for my business? And don't state that goal unless you have conviction around. Because if there's not conviction, it's not gonna people are gonna feel it. And
Yep.
it also I think does a disservice to the whole thing because then it's just window dressing and
Yep.
I don't know. I
Yeah.
don't want to get hired because I'm a woman.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with you. So the final question I have is what advice you would give to women aspiring into leadership positions in our sector?
This is gonna sound a bit cliche, but it's true for me, which is to try to be as authentic as possible.
Yeah.
I think it's really tempting to try to become someone.
Hmm.
And listen, we all evolve and grow,
Yep.
and that's part of it. I think part of the benefit of having the growing wrinkles is that you sort of just settle into your skin, into your existence. um my I have found that where I am most effective is in settling most into myself and being able to communicate from a place of authenticity and conviction,
Yeah.
whether that's talking to investors or talking to trying to buy a project or talking to whomever, our team. um, and everyone has different styles, everyone has different approaches, and to sort of lean into who you are
Yeah.
versus and it doesn't mean we shouldn't push ourselves, doesn't mean to not be uncomfortable, but to lean into that within your natural personality, your natural gifts and talents. um
Yeah.
that's the best I have.
Yeah. And I mean, that's the thing. It's sort of a blessing and a curse. It's like, I look back at my younger self and I'm like, oh, she was so skinny. And then I think, but
Ditto.
mentally, I'm so happy. Like I'm so much happier than
Yes.
she was.
Yes.
It's a shame that you can't have both, but leaning into your authentic self, it's
Skinny and happy.
right,
Yeah.
skinny and happy. But leaning into your authentic self is just so right because I do feel like the older, I get as a woman, I feel that less apologetic. Like I feel like I can be more of who I am as a woman. And so, it's trying to get younger women to feel that, I do think it comes with time, a lot of this, and
Yeah.
experience.
Well, and when you get where we both are, where we're have our own companies or
Yeah.
commercial owners, there's a luxury that comes with that
Yes.
because there's not the concern of is my paycheck going away? We have other concerns as to why our paycheck might go away, but it's not someone else
Yeah.
having a different view on us. And also just as you get more power and whatever that means, it
Yeah.
is easier to be your authentic self because you have less uh, exposure.
Mhm.
um I mean, at some points you have more because there's more to lose, but I appreciate that. I also think that going back to advice to younger women is if the environment which you're in is not allowing you to lean into sort of who you are at core, then it might not be the right place.
Right.
And so, because I do think there are places that will not safely allow you to be who you are, to
Yeah.
say, I need to leave at 5 to go pick up my kids, or at like, I want to
Yeah.
bring my wife to this event. Like, there are places where that is not safe,
Yeah.
or welcomed or accepted. And so if it's not, maybe that's means that might not be a place to flourish.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's right. And I think also one of our superpowers, and we have many, is our gut instinct. I think a lot of times we know that, and you try and sort of still make it work, even
Yeah.
though you know that it's probably not where you can be
Yeah,
authentic.
you feel it in your shoulders, you feel it in your arms when something isn't quite settling.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for talking to me, Anne Marie. It was really great getting to know you, and I just really appreciate everything that you're doing in our industry. Just a role model for a lot of people. So thank you.
I appreciate the time with you. Thank you.